Hi, my name's Claire Ingram and I'm from the University of York in the UK, and I'm presenting today what we know about how software practitioners are using informal local meetings to share software engineering knowledge. So in the last decade or 15 years, the number of local groups and meetings which are held in cities all around the world, which are dedicated to the topics of technology and software development, have really grown at enormous rates. And we now know that potentially up to thousands of practitioners are regularly attending these meetings and discussing aspects of technology development. Despite the phenomenon though and how large it is, virtually nothing is known about the size of these communities, how they work, and their potential for influencing software development in practice. And to that end, we set about in our paper, which accompanies this talk, to answer a number of research questions which will tell us a bit of basic information about how these communities work. I don't have time, unfortunately, to cover all of them in this short talk. I do urge you to go and take a look at the paper, which outlines all the research questions we addressed, the design of the research, and how we collected the data. But very briefly in this talk, I'd like to talk through a couple of different questions that we attempted to answer. First of all, we collected information which helps us answer the question of what motivates software professionals to participate in technology meetups. And secondly, we also collected information which helps us understand whether these kind of informal local meetings, which take place in cities all around the world, do they allow software developers and professionals to access some kind of knowledge or resources that they find hard to get elsewhere? And we think that's an interesting question because, of course, practitioners do have access to high-quality resources from all sorts of different sources, such as social media like Slack and Stack Exchange for getting technical answers to questions, as well as online webinars and resources to help them learn new knowledge as well. We think that's relevant because if local meetings are providing information they can't get elsewhere, that's of interest for the purposes of regional development, because that would imply there's some kind of regional pool of knowledge which can be supporting them when they meet face to face with their peers. So first of all, looking at motivations, we wanted to ask ourselves what actually motivates people to participate in these types of meetings. And that's really split into two different questions. And the first is what actually motivates group leaders to start a new group and continue running it, which is quite a big undertaking. And the second is what motivates those people who go along to participate in meetings as opposed to running the meetings. I'm just going to address one of those questions here in this short talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we know about the motivations of group leaders. We collected information by interview, and the processes we did to do that are detailed in our paper. And we found that most group leaders have, of course, as expected, many different reasons for starting groups. But the major group motivations that they have were their own interest in their own learning, and secondly, a great interest in meeting people, creating opportunities to do that, and building out a network. And they gave us quite a lot of different reasons why they thought it was important to be able to meet people and build a network. There's a lot more information about those motivations in our paper. Secondly, we also set ourselves the task of trying to understand what meetings offer software professionals that perhaps they may or may not be able to get elsewhere. And that was quite a difficult question sometimes to answer. We set many of our interviewees an open-ended question, what they thought they got from meetings, from meeting people in their local city face-to-face to talk about technology that they thought they don't really get from other types of sources. And a number of different answers arose in their open-ended questions when they were talking about these issues. I'm going to touch on a couple of those in this short talk, although there's further discussion in our paper. The first I want to talk about is the issue of storytelling. Storytelling was a concept that was raised by several interviewees when we asked them what they got from meetings. A very common way of structuring a meeting, by no means the only, but a common way, is for a person who has recently completed a project to give a presentation to the group at a meeting, covering how they covered a recent project, what kind of technologies they used, challenges they encountered, and so on, like telling a story. And that was the kind of content that many interviewees found attractive. So we become good quality software engineers, and we become good project managers through the experience of conducting project management or through the experience of engineering software. It's quite difficult to learn from a book. The knowledge we pick up in this way tends to be very application specific, sometimes difficult to share. Often we take it for granted and don't really write it down. Telling stories allows us to communicate and to some extent transfer some of this experience-based knowledge, because it allows us to impart details about our experiences which are heavily context based. And a second concept which arose, which we think is important, is many of our interviewees talked about the importance of being able to access an experienced group of peers in their local city, working in the similar sort of area and similar specialisms, because it helps them gain reassurance. And this is particularly important for those technical practitioners who might be working in startups or small firms or non-digital native firms where there's a very small technical team, or perhaps those who are the only specialist in a firm. Being able to access a pool of experienced talent and practitioners local to them allowed them to build confidence that many of the solutions they're designing and recommendations they're making in their own work were the correct ones, and that challenges they were encountering are shared across the industry. Many of the interviewees we spoke to did give examples of the types of task and software engineering task which they thought was facilitated by having access to this informal, experienced peer group. And that included things like elaborating requirements in a much better way, improving the way that business requirements are elicited as well from users, and perhaps experimenting with different choices of language. And it's quite complex tasks like that which are greatly aided by being able to talk to other experienced peers. There is a lot more information in our written paper, of course. I urge you to take a look at it. In conclusion, just let me leave you with a few comments about what we did discover. We found, first of all, some evidence that informal local meetings do provide useful and relevant information to practitioners. Almost everyone we spoke to or collected evidence from did agree that they learned things from going along to meetups and informal meetings in their local city that they put into their own practice. We also found that many of the practitioners are quite highly experienced, and almost everyone going along to these meetups is currently working in technology fields. So we would suggest, based on our work, that local meetings do appear to act as useful forums for transferring tacit and experience-based knowledge, which is particularly important for software engineering practice, and is particularly useful and relevant when acquiring quite complex skills such as requirement solicitation. We suggest then that being able to access an experience pool like this is particularly important for SMEs and startups and those who are working quite small technical teams. And we also suggest that it's worth looking into in terms of regional development, because the quality and ease of access to the local experience pool may vary significantly across regions, and that may have implications for emerging technical clusters in different parts of the world. Thank you. I would love to hear any questions that you might have, and please don't hesitate to get in touch if you find the paper interesting.